Someone brings up an old argument again. Not because it will fix anything, not because the other person will suddenly understand, not because there is new information. They bring it up because somewhere inside them, that moment still feels unfinished. You can see it in small ways. A friend still talks about the betrayal from years ago. A parent still repeats the mistake someone made in the family. A person in a relationship keeps returning to one sentence their partner said during an argument. Someone still remembers the day they were embarrassed, rejected, ignored, or made to feel small. And from the outside, people say the same thing. Why are you still thinking about that? Just move on. That happened so long ago. But inside their mind, it does not feel old. It feels active. It feels like an open file, like a case that was never closed. And here's the part most people miss. Some people are not stuck in the past because they enjoy suffering. They are stuck because the past became part of how they understand themselves. The real question is not, why can't they let go? The deeper question is, what does their mind think it is protecting? Because when someone keeps replaying the past, they are usually not just replaying an event, they are replaying the meaning of that event. A betrayal does not stay as just a betrayal. It becomes, I can't trust people. A failure does not stay as just a failure. It becomes, I am not capable. A rejection does not stay as just rejection. It becomes, I was never enough. A moment of humiliation does not stay as one bad moment. It becomes, people will always look down on me. That is why the memory keeps returning. The mind is not simply saying, remember what happened. It is saying, figure out what this means about you. And that is where people get trapped. Because memories are not always dangerous by themselves. The real problem starts when a memory becomes an identity. The person does not just remember being rejected. They start seeing themselves as someone who gets rejected. They do not just remember being betrayed. They start seeing themselves as someone who should never trust too much. They do not just remember being embarrassed. They start moving through life as if everyone is waiting for them to make another mistake. This is why letting go is not as simple as stop thinking about it. Because the past is no longer just something that happened. It has become evident. Evidence for how people are. Evidence for what life is like. Evidence for what they should expect. Evidence for who they think they are. And once the mind treats pain as evidence, it becomes very hard to ignore. This usually begins in moments where the person felt powerless. Maybe they were too young to defend themselves. Maybe they were outnumbered. Maybe they did not have the right words at the time. Maybe they were treated unfairly, but nobody believed them. Maybe they never got an apology. Maybe they never got an explanation. That is when the past becomes sticky. Because the mind hates unfinished emotional business. It wants a clean ending. It wants the missing conversation. It wants the other person to finally admit what they did. It wants the perfect comeback. It wants to go back and say the thing it should have said. So the mind keeps returning to the scene, hoping that if it thinks about it one more time, it will finally feel resolved. But that is the trap. Replaying the past feels like control. It feels like doing something. It feels like preparation, like protection, like justice, like clarity. But most of the time, it does not change the event. It only keeps the nervous system living near the same old wound. This is why a person can understand logically that something is over, but still behave emotionally like the case is open. They know the relationship ended, but they are still arguing in their head. They know the opportunity is gone, but they are still trying to prove they deserved it. They know the insult was years ago, but their body still reacts like the room is full of the same people. Because the deeper attachment is not always to the event itself. Sometimes people are attached to the version of themselves that was hurt, ignored, or left behind. That version of them is still standing there, waiting to be defended. So every time the memory returns, it carries a hidden message. I wasn't wrong. I didn't deserve that. I should have spoken up. They should have understood. That moment should not define me. And strangely, holding on to the past can start to feel like loyalty. This is the surprising contradiction. Sometimes, people do not hold on to the past because they are weak. They hold on to it because letting go feels like betrayal. If they stop thinking about it, it feels like they are saying it did not matter. If they forgive too quickly, it feels like the other person got away with it. If they move on, it feels like they are abandoning the younger version of themselves who had to survive that moment. So they keep the memory alive, not because it helps them live better, but because it feels like proof that what happened was real. And in the beginning, that can feel protective. But over time, that protection becomes a cage. Because the past starts making decisions in the present. It decides who they trust. It decides what they avoid. It decides how quickly they become defensive. It decides why they over-explain. It decides why they expect disappointment before anything even happens. It decides why certain people trigger a reaction that feels bigger than the current situation. And this is what most people misunderstand. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean excusing what happened. It does not mean pretending it was small. It does not mean the other person was right. Letting go means removing the event from the position of authority. Because the issue is not that you remember the past. The issue is when the past still gets to define your present identity. A person can remember something clearly without letting it become the main proof of who they are. That is the difference. So the better question is not, how do I forget this? A better question is, what did I start believing about myself after this happened? Because that belief is usually the real chain. Maybe the event taught you to be careful, but now you are suspicious of everyone. Maybe it taught you not to be naive, but now you cannot relax around good people. Maybe it taught you to protect your dignity, but now every small disagreement feels like disrespect. Maybe it taught you to survive, but now survival has become your whole personality. That is where the pattern becomes visible. Notice where the past is still making choices for you. Who do you distrust before they have done anything? What do you avoid because it reminds you of an old failure? Where do you overreact because the current moment feels like an old scene? What are you still trying to prove? And who are you still trying to prove it to? Because sometimes the past does not control people loudly. It controls them quietly through their habits, their reactions, their expectations, and their identity. People do not let go of the past by pretending it did not matter. They let go when the past no longer gets to decide what they are allowed to become. Because the real danger is not remembering what happened. The real danger is building your entire personality around surviving it. The past may explain why you became careful, guarded, or suspicious, but it does not have to remain the author of who you become next. If this made you think of a moment you still carry, don't ignore the pattern. Subscribe to Why People Do This for more clear psychology behind everyday behavior, and share this with someone who needs to hear that the past can explain them, but it doesn't have to define them.